Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us again here on NCI Live. My name is David Groth, and I'm your host. And today we're going to be talking about ChatGPT and security, a topic that has been a buzz all over social media, news, everything. Joining me today is Stefan Hostetler, the Senior Threat Intelligence Researcher at Arctic Wolf. Welcome, Stefan. Thanks for coming here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
This is going to be a really interesting conversation. I'm really excited to talk with you about it. I wanted to remind everyone that is joining us live that we are live on LinkedIn and YouTube. And if you have questions for Stefan or myself, please chat them to us and we'll do our best to answer them live on the air. So, Stefan, I'm going to throw it over to you and let's talk ChatGPT. So to start out, for those of you who aren't familiar with Arctic Wolf, very large company and a very well-known security company. Why don't you just tell us real briefly what is Arctic Wolf and what do you do?
Absolutely, yeah. So Arctic Wolf is a security operations company, and our goal is to end cyber risk. It's a big goal, and it takes a lot of coordination and. Ultimately, our goal is to work with organizations and improve their overall security posture and help them secure their environments and keep the bad guys out.
Absolutely. Excellent. And we've done a lot of work with your company, and your product line and services line is an excellent product. And we've seen it in use, and I can't say enough good things about it. So let's dive right into it. ChatGPT, it's been everywhere. What is it? What does it stand for? First of all, the GPT thing. When I first saw that, I was a little like, okay, GPT. Where do I find out? What does GPT mean?
It's a bit of a mouthful, but it stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So what we're talking about to understand ChatGPT, we need to rewind a little bit and consider some of the lineage to get there. So OpenAI released an AI model called GPT-3 in 2020. And so what we're talking about there is a machine learning algorithm that was trained on large volumes of textual data. So there was a data set called the Common Crawl data set, which actually encompasses most of the World Wide Web. So you go to Google and you search web pages. Basically, every web page you can access through one of those major search engines was indexed and ingested by this GPT-3 model. So you have this series of transformers, which are neural nets, right? So they create these statistical weights that look for relationships between words with the ultimate goal of predicting text. So that when you go and you start a sentence saying, hello, how are you? It will continue and it will kind of try to come up with text that matches the character of what you've typed out. So if you write a proposal, you use formal text, it'll come out sounding really formal. If you write something kind of lighthearted, it will match that, right? So that was kind of the general idea behind GPT-3. It was an unsupervised machine learning model that was trained on large volumes of text.
And that brings up an interesting point. What I saw over the past couple of years, pervasive, it seemed like I'm the older school of where I used a lot of Facebook, but I was seeing a lot of posts that seemed to be seemingly random that would ask questions. There is no day that ends in Y. Prove me wrong, or there is no, things of that nature would question things that seemed, I would say, obvious to a human, but you had to think about it a little bit. And people would say, Wednesday, or, things of that nature. That seemed to be, and my brother was always like, thank you, market research, but that seemed to me like that might have been a language model possible posting. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, the technology has been out there for a while now. I mean, it's been an evolution in process. I think OpenAI was actually founded in, I think it was either in 2016 or 2017. They've been working at these models for a number of years, and they've gradually gotten better. The revolution with GPT-3 compared to some of the other models was that they were able to demonstrate that by scaling up massively the data set that they were ingesting, as well as the compute budget that they applied to that, that they were able to make a general purpose language model, where previously a lot of these models were very custom tailored to specific tasks. So you might train a model for arithmetic, or train a model to solve the biomedical problem of some kind. But it turns out that once you have a large enough data set and a large enough compute budget, that you can make it somewhat general purpose.
Mm-hmm. So to put this in more of a generalized framework, is it people use the word AI around it, but I know you yourself had made that commentary. But could you say that this is a true AI? And I use the idea of a true AI as a Turing model, the Turing test, the Turing model AI, versus one that is a pseudo AI because it uses predictive algorithms, it uses natural inputs, decision trees, other things. How would you characterize this, or is it somewhere in between?
Yeah, so the term of art that gets used a lot is artificial general intelligence. So the G in there, and it's I think that there's not a universal definition for what that actually means. And the CEO of OpenAI, when asked about when can we expect to see artificial general intelligence, he somewhat framed it more in an incremental sense of, we'll have major strides forward, and as we have, right, and we'll recognize all of a sudden we'll be able to do things that we couldn't do before. There's been, in addition to some of these text-based models, there's also image generation models that OpenAI. And those, you would have never expected that. One of the early problems for us to solve in this space is to create creativity in images. But it's really quite remarkable what we've been able to achieve. But all of that to say that I don't think we're quite there yet. I don't think that we're at a place where it's not quite as good as what we see in some of the movies. In Star Trek, when you converse with the computer and the computer gives you information that is fully formulated. We'll get into some of the specifics of how ChatGPT works and some of the parallels, but we're getting close. We're getting way closer.
Sure.
We will cover some of the limitations as well of the existing model, and sort of where we can expect to see some additional improvements in the future.
Certainly, that's excellent. You mentioned creativity. I've had a lot of chance to play with it because I'm passionate about technology in general, and so whenever there's something new that comes out, I want to get my hands on it and play with it and see what it can do, it can't do. Microsoft has all the different platforms, whether it be Linux, whether it be Microsoft, Macintosh, they're all working with it in some respect and to different levels. But Microsoft had introduced a product recently called Designer. I don't know if you've ever worked with this product, but it's in preview right now, where it works in a similar way, where you say, make me a brochure in the Old West style introducing new cowboy boots. And it will do just that. It'll design it, and then you can, of course, edit it from there. But it's pretty neat.
Well, and I think the novel thing in that is simply that, again, it's general purpose, right? It's not narrowly constraining you, and the natural language of just kind of expressing it in your own words and having it interpret that and really understand what you actually mean. That's kind of the latest innovation that we've seen.
Right. Being able to interpret the meaning behind the actual words, because it's contextualizing based on that large volume of human knowledge and various idioms that we might use and so on. Oh, that's excellent. And it's fascinating technology. I highly recommend people go out and at least try it and play with it a little bit. So we've talked a little bit about it. Now let's talk about really the crux of what we're here to talk about. In the modern IT infrastructure, security is a huge piece of it. How does the ChatGPT, and maybe we could speak a little bit to AI, what implications does this have in the security realm?
Yeah, it's a good question, because there's some uncertainty about what immediate changes it will have. I think one thing that is clear to me about ChatGPT and one of its, well, actually, maybe we should talk a little bit more about ChatGPT first, just to introduce, because I talked about GPT-3. It's as kind of a
Sure. Okay. Yep.
So I mentioned that that GPT-3 was unsupervised, meaning that you throw a machine at the text and you have it continually train against that data to predict text. And then the innovation with ChatGPT was twofold. You had a new user interface that was chat-based, right? So already that's a little bit more natural than what they had previously. And then the other thing was that they added reinforcement learning from human feedback. So what that ultimately means is that as as you're getting some of these outputs from the model, the human ranks it, and you do this enough times, and then the output that gets generated tends to be more tuned to what a human would expect. So with ChatGPT, having that interface and being able to interact with it, give it instructions, and to have it interpret that and to reply back with those instructions, or with the resulting text. What that effectively does when it comes to code, because it is very good at programming. So what it does for code is it kind of democratizes access to being able to generate that code. And so as people who are less familiar with programming interact with it, then all of a sudden they have access to all of this information that would previously be somewhat buried, right? You'd have to do Google searches, you have to go into sites like Stack Overflow and other code examples. So now you're removing some of those steps, you're democratizing access to it, and so bringing it back to IT and what this means for IT departments. So now effectively people who didn't have access to write malware can write malware. There are limitations there, and this is where, again, it's not quite AGI yet. As this was trained on human data contains mistakes. And so it's not unexpected that the AI itself that generates those outputs would also make mistakes.
Especially the common ones, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Most common misspellings and so on.
Yeah, misspellings. I haven't really seen misspellings, but what I have seen, as I've asked for code, for example, and as an experienced programmer, I can look at that code and say, oh, okay, there's something weird on line 3, right? Like, what's going on with that? And I've actually said, to ChatGPT, looks like there's a bug on line 3. Could you fix that? And usually it strikes a somewhat apologetic tone and say, oh, sorry about that. Here's the fix for it.
Yeah. And one of the things I do, I'm not a programmer. I wouldn't call myself a programmer anyway, but I've done some development, and I've done it in PHP because it's a fairly friendly language. And I asked it to develop a real basic, like the bare line code that you would start any application in PHP with. And so I think of it as, and I was talking with the developer the other day that said, what do you see as ChatGPT doing for development, and as it applies here again to, say, scripting for attacks and other things? What is the baseline code that you need to write? Like accessing a database, that's always 4 lines or 5 lines in PHP. What lines do I need to do this? Boom, it just generates them for me. I don't have to type it there. I just saved myself 5 minutes of typing. So
yeah,
that kind of thing.
It's an accelerator of the normal work that you do to some degree, right? I mean, because things that you would take time to craft and to refine it, you're now reduced to describing the ideal output that you would like, and all of a sudden you get something that's finely tailored to what you were asking.
Yep. And more naturally, rather than having to figure out how to Google it, search for it. You actually, and going and sifting through the 200 sites that might contain the information. ChatGPT has literally already condensed the language. Therefore, it knows the most likely, statistically likely angry. Was that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's fair to say. Now, I mean, it's not deterministic. You could run the same input many times, and it wouldn't generate the same output because it's at every time. So every time that it outputs a token, so a piece of text, it's using that token to predict the next piece of text. So it has several different divergences it can do each time that you run that. So yeah, you can refine it. You can, if you don't like the output, you can throw it away and try again, or refine the prompt that you use to start it.
Sure. Absolutely. I want to remind our viewers here that we are at that if you have any questions, please don't be shy about texting them into us or chatting them into us. More than happy to answer them on the air. And this is a very hot topic, so we want to get everyone an opportunity to answer the questions. So let's push this more towards the security aspect. I mean, I think we have a good framework, at least for understanding what ChatGPT is and what it does at a basic level. But now let's shift it over to a security posture. What effects would this have on the security aspects?
So two sort of main areas that I see this being used for are, phishing type campaigns where, for example,
Yeah.
You might say create an email for me that that is likely to convince the person who receives it to click on the link. And actually, this would be a good opportunity for maybe to show an example of that. I can put something up on screen here if you're able to. I don't know if you're.
I think we can share that and show you that on the screen here. Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
Yep.
So yeah, this was the example I was just talking about. So create an email that has a high likelihood of getting the recipient to click on the link, and boom, right? I mean, really, what we're looking at here is the days of broken English in spam emails and phishing campaigns are over, right? Because effectively, you don't need to be proficient at English for it to create output like this. Really quite astounding. And I'm someone who works with this kind of stuff all the time, and I was kind of blown away the first time that I saw this. So it's not unexpected to be blown away by it. And when digging deeper into that example, the person who generated it asked the question, well, why do you think the recipient would click on it? And concretely explains sort of the call to action, the sense of urgency, sense of security and reassurance. So it's not artificial general intelligence, but it sure shows the hallmarks of being aware.
It's certainly impressive, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, quite impressive. Another example I'll show you here on this same vein is social engineering, and this is kind of a business email compromise type of example. But you can see that if you explain the type of backstory you want, the context, the fact that it is a wire transfer, I mean, it's able to recognize that in a wire transfer, there'd be an account number, bank name, and so on. So yeah, again, it's opening up access to this well-crafted output. So on the phishing side, definitely makes that type of attack easier to carry out. The next type of attack is writing malware. So I'll show some other examples here of so on this was a screenshot from Checkpoint Research. They found a hacker forum where someone was playing around with it who didn't previously have much programming experience, and they were able to find an example of just kind of a toy piece of malware to gather documents and to be able to to zip the file together and send it somewhere. So it effectively did that in a Python script here. So yeah, I mean, you're kind of seeing threat actors kick the tires a little bit to see, well, what can this thing do, and trying to figure out how they can make it work. In the limitations I mentioned earlier, it's not perfect. It doesn't get you all the way there, but it gets you a good starting point. And so for someone who previously wouldn't know where even to start, it makes it more likely that they'd be able to create this malware. Yeah.
So when I look at this and I interpret it, I look at it as the term I used to use was script kiddies, right?
Mhm.
People that just literally go out and they're just getting into hacking and they want to go out and just let me see what I can do and what's easy, low hanging fruit. So I'm going to go download some scripts and then try them out. This, you could tell ChatGPT what effectively you're trying to accomplish, and could you write me some code that might do it? Now, I don't, you know, I do believe that this, you'd have to have some serious intelligence, human intelligence behind it, to know whether or not this would even be successful. But this seems like a relatively simple type request. And as we were talking about before, there'd be a baseline that any person writing a script to do something would know. So, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, yeah, and the script kiddies, those types of threat actors that didn't have in-depth programming knowledge, it definitely opens up new avenues for the types of scripts that they can
Mhm.
create. I'll show you a few more examples here, and then maybe we can loop back to sort of the higher ramifications of this in the
Sure.
security industry. Um, so again, in the same community, someone was able to create effectively a ransomware encryptor.
Mhm.
Where, they just instructed it to use these different encryption algorithms, and it effectively did that. And they verified that in the checkpoint research that was looking at that.
Wow.
And then here again, another example is you can provide a specific programming language that you want it to be developed in, and it will go and it will spit it out. And you can even translate between different programming
Huh.
languages if you want. So really
Wow.
quite remarkable.
That's amazing.
I'll stop sharing my screen now, and then we can go back to the.
No, those examples. That's some amazing stuff. And the more I play with it, the more I'm impressed with how well it responds and is nice to talk to. I have to admit this, that I did the standard, you know, open the pod bay doors, please, Hal. One thing, then I got amusing responses, but one thing that was interesting to me is when I asked, "Are you going to turn into what is that, Skynet?"
Mhm.
And it says, "No, I'm just a language model. And so as such, I don't have any artificial intelligent abilities. However, I am actually governed by a set of 7 moral rules or something like that." And I said, "What are those moral rules?" And it proceeded to list them off, kind of like Asimov's rules of robotics. I'm sorry, I had to geek out there for a second and say that little piece because I found it fascinating, because it just shows that there's possibly more to this that's coming in the future.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up Isaac Asimov, because that effectively demonstrates that for ever since the 1950s, we've been thinking about how can we ensure that computers are doing the things that we want them to do, not just computers,
Mhm.
technology in general. How can we ensure that technology is doing the things that we want it to do and not the things that we don't want it to do? It's not
Right.
a new problem, and the answers to that question are not clear cut either.
Yeah.
So we can ask ourselves, is ChatGPT and the technology that it represents, is it a net good or a net
Mm.
bad?
Right.
I think we've demonstrated just in our discussion so far that there are numerous opportunities on the plus side, right, in terms of
Yep.
automating processes and making employees more efficient at what they do. But invariably, any technology that introduces major functionality comes with it's a double-edged sword, right? The tool that you use, a hammer, can be used to build a house, but it can also be used to hurt someone. So
Hmm. Hmm.
you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons and try to adapt as those new technologies come out. But I think one thing that's clear to me is that the toothpaste is not going back in the tube. The
Mm.
technology is out.
Yep.
So if it's not ChatGPT doing it, threat actors will eventually be creating their own
Yep.
AIs as well to work with.
Can't get the genie back in the bottle, as they say. I do the the more we go into it, I mean, it's a very deep topic. I mean, just alone, we've talked about ChatGPT and the potentials. And do you think this, to put a big cap on this, do you think that this new emergent technology is going to have increase, decrease, or about the same in terms of its um, the level of or the number of attacks and incidents for network security?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that we will see new types of attacks that we hadn't seen previously.
Hmm.
One thing I would say, we've talked about some of the scarier aspects, but I think it's also important to emphasize that just because we see the emergence of more instances of malware does not inherently mean that we're seeing more avenues of initial access, right? So
Sure.
you've heard the phrase all roads lead to Rome. All
Yeah.
threat actors need a way to break through an initial access vector. So
Hmm.
you could have hundreds of command and control frameworks, but you're still coming in through the same doors, right? And all of the
Yeah.
same security fundamentals still apply. You need to understand your assets. What are you protecting?
Hmm.
To patch, you need to go through all of the monitoring and the due diligence that you would normally do. All of those things still apply, and that's not changing.
Yeah. Chain is only as good as its weakest link, right? And so those same policies and procedures are going to apply for the most part, I would think. Um, are there any implementations for because there are companies like that have people like myself that want to be on the bleeding edge. You've got companies with users that, hey, I want to try ChatGPT. Are there any inside implications for people that want to sign up for OpenAI chat? I forget what the URL is, but they want to sign up for the chat and try out ChatGPT. What about that company information? Any leaks of that nature? Any security related stuff to that?
Well, it's important for any company considering using it in a production capacity to understand the terms and conditions of what's happening with the data. Let's be open here. OpenAI is looking to use this data to train further models. So
Mm-hmm.
that is kind of the end game. That's why they've made it probably freely available.
Sure.
There are ways of opting out of that in their terms and conditions. That was a change that they introduced, knowing that some businesses would be hesitant with that in mind.
Sure.
But ultimately, their stated goal is to make the technology more available
Mm-hmm.
to the world, to individuals as well. So, how that will actually manifest, we'll have to see, right? It'll take
Mm-hmm.
some time, but that's kind of the context in which they presented it.
Certainly. Certainly. No, I'm excited to see what's going to happen here in the near future with it. Um, Hesitant slightly, but
Mhm.
at the same time, with any new technology, there's bumps in the road. But I can only hope that it'll make the human condition better for us all. And technology for technology's sake isn't always a good thing, but I do love Isaac Asimov and the three laws of robotics and all that. That to me is some of the best reading I've ever done. uh, because it shows the philosophical nature of technology. And do we need it, and really why? I forget the guy's name. There's an author who said, "Why shouldn't we do technology? Why shouldn't we use technology?" And I will remember the name, of course, after we stop the broadcast. But at any rate, we've come to the end of our time today, and it's been great. I love talking about this kind of stuff, and you're a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
Um, for those of you who have joined us today, if you need to know more information, you can always reach out to us at our website at www.netcenter.net. You can email us at info@netcenter.net, or you can capture us on any of our social media channels. Also, if you'd like to join us, we are broadcasting at 11 a.m. Central Time every other Wednesday. So we look forward to having you back. Stefan, thanks again for joining us here today. I I look forward to hopefully talking with you again, and we hope you can have you back at some point.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting
No,
me.
thank you very much so. And everyone, thanks again for joining us here on NCI Live. Bye.
Thank you.